As we promised, it's just before fall break, and I am taking time to talk to Dr. Olin and see how the first quarter of things here in the Greenfield Central School Corporation is going. Dr. Olin, thanks for being here. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. It is an exciting time of year as we try to reflect back on what we've accomplished for the first quarter, and also thinking ahead. I think all of our students, staff, and your superintendent as well, we're all looking forward to a little bit of a break.
Yeah, I was looking out my back door last night, and the first thing that came to my mind was these leaves are all coming down.
Yes, which means a lot of work ahead of you.
A lot of work ahead of me. So fall is definitely here. It's a little cooler, and I've had to break out the old hoodies. So we're halfway through the semester. How are things going throughout the corporation? Not just here at the high school, but everywhere.
I've actually been pretty pleased looking back, and I think we talked about this a couple months ago. We hired a lot of new teachers this year to the district, and a lot of that pertaining to some retirements, and of course with a district of our size, when we have over 300 certified staff members, you just have a lot of movement. So I have been able to spend a little bit of time with new teachers in a couple of orientation settings. I'm pretty excited about the teachers that we've been able to bring in to add to the staff that we've already had that do a great job. So it's been good from a staffing standpoint, from a student standpoint. I've been in our buildings a lot over the last week in particular. Kids still excited to be at school, excited to learn, to be around their peers. Certainly there are some things that are a little different for us here, as I know we're going to talk about in a little while, but for the most part, kids happy to be at school, happy to be with their teachers, their peers, and to be learning. That's what we're here for.
Absolutely. School board recently voted almost off the cuff to bring back the mask mandate. I think they looked at some statistics and said they needed to act, and bravo to them to getting out ahead of this. Why do you think this is important?
Well, you see, I have some key cue cards in front of me here as I think about some of the statistics, looking for where we've been throughout the course of the year. And I have this in front of me because I want to make a few references to it, but just also to point out that we've been sharing with our school board from the beginning of the year the number of cases that we have, the number of students that are being quarantined or identified as close contacts, the number of students that are vaccinated, and ultimately the number of students that are being excluded from school, even though they may be healthy, but because they've been identified as a close contact. So as we've continued to give that information to the board, we've had some healthy conversations about that with the 5 members of the board. And certainly it is a topic that everyone seems to have an opinion about. And I think as we started the school year, we were all very optimistic that we could have life back to normal, or as much to normal as possible. And as we continued to watch those number of positive cases over the first few weeks, we're kind of building to a crescendo where that week of August 22nd was our highest number of cases. We had 30 cases that week. We were hearing things from the hospital, the health department, from the state, that the Delta variant, we were hoping it had reached its peak about that time. Unfortunately, our experience in Greenfield Central was different than that. We did have our lowest number of cases that 2 weeks later, the week of September 5th, where we only had 12 positive cases. Now, to give you something that as maybe a measuring stick, really as we had looked over those first 5 weeks, we were having about 20 cases per week. So when we went back to 12, we were thinking things are moving in the right direction. Unfortunately, the 2 weeks that followed that, the week of September 12th and last week, the week of the 19th, we had 32 cases and 31 cases respectively, which means that we've had our highest 2 weeks the last 2 weeks. So we'd had 32 that week of the 12th. The board met on the 20th, where we had 8 new cases that day. So to have 40 of them within an 8-day period was enough for the board to take some action, to do something a little bit differently. Rather than being reactive, try to do something proactively as we went into break. Obviously, we'll have a couple weeks over break to see if trends are changing a little bit in the state, and that'll give us an opportunity to see when we come back there in October if we need to continue that, or whether we go back to that normalcy we started the year with. But you made the comment, it kind of seemed out of nowhere. I can tell you that the board has had a lot of conversation about that. We have shared a spreadsheet with them going back into last year where they can see how many cases we have per day, what buildings those are happening in. So they weren't surprised by the numbers, but just felt like the numbers had hit a point where we needed to respond. I can tell you for the last 2 weeks, we've had a positive case in all 8 of our schools in each of the last 2 weeks. That was not the case at all early in the year. We would go weeks and some buildings didn't see any positive cases. But I think that information is something that maybe I've not done a nice job of sharing with our community, that it wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. If you remember, the governor of Indiana, Governor Holcomb, on September 1st, came out with a new executive order. The following day, the Department of Health, Indiana Department of Health, came out with some new guidelines that public schools could follow. At that point, it was determined that if all students and staff were regularly wearing masks, we would not have to exclude or quarantine students who are identified as close contacts. Well, for us in Greenfield Central, I'm telling you, we're excluding about 200, a little over 200 students per week. Keep in mind that's a 2-week quarantine, so at any given time we had approximately 400 healthy students at home. We were given new parameters which we could have used as early as September 2nd. We chose not to implement that right away because our trend was going the other way. You know, I told you we had only 12 positive cases that week early in September. Unfortunately, that trend didn't last. It went a different direction. So we then implemented the new rules that were allowed to public schools. And obviously you've seen a number of school corporations that started the year hoping to be maskless, not using them, that have implemented some sort of mask mandate because numbers are higher than we assumed and the rules have changed for us. Our goal is to educate students. You know, I feel like I'm pretty good in matters of curriculum, staffing. I've learned a whole lot about facilities, but to ask me to be an epidemiologist, that's not what my doctorate's in. We are looking to the guidance of the CDC, the Indiana Department of Health, and trusting that they're advising us appropriately and feeling like if we're here to educate students, we know we do it best when kids are in our buildings. If we can get 400 kids more in our buildings as a result of these changes, we, that would be the board and the administrative team, feel like it was a direction that we need to implement for a period of time. That's one of the questions I know you have for me. How long do we stay in that, in this new mask mandate? And I don't have an answer for that. I think it would be foolish for me to say we're going to do this for 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 2 months. We need to follow the data. We've lived through a pandemic for a little bit over a year, but what we're seeing this year in August and September is totally different from what we saw last year. What I can tell you is our highest numbers last year were between November and January. So if our numbers are highest in this pandemic in that stretch November to January, I would say it's a good hypothesis would be that we're going to be in it for a while through the winter. But I'm not going to make that statement because something may happen here where that's not the case at all. You know, there are a lot of variables this year that we didn't have last year in terms of obviously the Delta variant being one of those, vaccinations being another. We know that about 80% of our staff members are vaccinated based on information that they have shared with us. We know that about 45% of our high school students are vaccinated, though that number continues to go up. We know that as we identify close contacts and we see who's been vaccinated, so they don't necessarily have to be excluded. And we know that at the junior high school, it's about 30 to 35% of our students. So it's lower than I would have thought it would be. But another number that I've shared with the board as we've looked at the school year, we've had almost, I think 33 cases among our staff members this year. And I'm telling you, about 80% of them are vaccinated. So we have a number of vaccinated staff members that have been COVID positive this year. That has been surprising to me. Not that we were ever given a promise that a vaccine meant you would not get it. That number's just a lot higher than I thought it would be. Now, fortunately, adults who've been vaccinated on our staff who have gotten it, they've been fairly mild cases. They haven't been in the hospital. They've not been put on ventilators. But it's still surprising data. So when you look at that whole picture, there are some surprises here. I just can't tell you where we're going to be 2 months from now. I guess that's a long-winded way of me saying that.
Yeah, and you know, we just have to evolve with it as it evolves. That's all you can ever do in something like this, because we don't know, because last year we never even thought of the Delta variant. You know, so this is kind of a new thing. I mean, it's part of the old thing, but it's the new thing now. So, you know, we're just going to roll with it as best we can, and I know we're going to do a great job. You recently had a sort of town hall school board meeting in the auditorium. How'd that go? I know a lot of people came out.
Yeah, we did have a lot of interest in our July board meeting and our August board meeting. And certainly had a few people that spoke in both the July and August board meetings, plural. We've had a number of people, as I've told you, people are very passionate in our community, and that's not a bad thing. You want people to be passionate about their kids' education. Certainly we've heard a lot of input about masks. We've heard things about critical race theory. We've heard things about censorship. We've heard things about our public participation policy. People in our community are sharing a lot of information with me, sharing a lot of information with the board through email. We had a number of parents and community members that told us beyond email, they wanted a setting with the board to share some input. So we did have a regular board meeting on September 13th. We followed that with the public forum, in which we allowed anybody who lives in Greenfield Central in our district to sign up and to speak. We had 8 people that chose to speak that evening. We probably had another 20 people that were in the audience, some of those staff members, some just interested community members. And we heard from those topics that I referenced. We also heard some comments about the high school dress code, that some people wanted us to consider some adjustments to them. So there weren't a lot of surprises that evening. I can tell you that the board was appreciative of that opportunity to hear from their constituents, and it's something we will consider moving forward, perhaps doing that once or twice per year. But I think it was good for our board to just show that they're always willing to listen, which they are, certainly through email. They correspond, and giving people opportunities in a public setting.
So as we head into the final half of this semester, what do you think are the biggest challenges we're going to be facing? You think it's just going to stay with the COVID, or?
Well, I hate to stay with that, but I think maybe a bigger theme would be perseverance. You know, we all had in our mind what we thought this school year was going to be like, and within a couple of weeks, I think those hopes were deferred a little bit. And I think putting the mask mandate in place here this week, asking students, staff, and parents to just persevere. It's not forever. It's going to be for a season, and helping people to keep that positive outlook. Remember why we're here, and that's about student learning. That's, I think, going to be a challenge. It's not been a challenge much at this point, but as we come back after fall break, as we monitor those numbers, I think people do get weary of these measures, these interventions. So I guess I'm going to ask for perseverance. That's going to be the biggest challenge we have, that people will struggle to show that.
So what do you think parents can do to help us in our efforts? We're kind of in partnership with them and the students, and how can the three of us work together to make sure things go well?
You bring up a great point. Public education is truly a partnership. If it's going to go well, if a student's going to learn at a maximum level, it takes obviously the support of the student. We want them to be focused on their learning. We want parents to provide all the supports possible that they can do in terms of obviously taking care of the physiological needs that their kids have, eating at appropriate times, getting rest, getting medical care if they need that. And certainly as staff, that commitment we need to have to all students to make sure that they're learning at their optimum levels. It is a partnership. So just asking parents specifically, who are probably our biggest audience here, just to listen to their kids, hear about the celebrations they have at school, any concerns that they have at school, certainly celebrating with kids in those celebrations, helping kids to push through some of those frustrations and barriers they may have, and when necessary to reach out to the teacher to draw that support as well, so we can give students that best experience possible. And of course I'm talking about from an instructional standpoint academically, but also socially, emotionally, and physically. It is a partnership that we have to try to make sure that kids get that very best experience when they're at Greenfield Central.
Well, as always, how can parents and the community reach out to us, and if they have any questions about anything we've talked about today?
Well, certainly I'm appreciative of those who are watching us on the 9-Star program here today, but certainly beyond that, making sure that parents have the correct information, contact information in Power School, phone numbers, email addresses, because we do send a lot of things out through a parent listserv that goes out on email. I think about inclement weather that we'll be having in the next couple months, making sure that the right phone numbers there so that text and voicemails are going through. Beyond that, of course, we do have our websites. High school does a nice job of keeping that updated, looking to the corporation website as well. Those are 3 avenues that we use quite frequently to communicate with our parents. So I go back to that earlier statement. Make sure that the information that parents have in Power School is up to date.
Absolutely. It's always the best way to get in touch with them and us as well. So as always, thanks for being here. It's just before time to start raking the leaves, so I guess I'll probably be bugging you just before winter break in a few months, and we got a lot ahead of us, and it's kind of a fun season coming ahead too. So it's not just going to be masks and COVID. It's going to be a lot of fun things here at the high school and in the corporation in general. So I look forward to it.
I always look forward to the fall. Everything from we've got a choir event this evening. I'll put a shameless plug out there for that. And obviously the band representing us hopefully at the state again this year. And I think about drama productions, basketball games coming up. I don't want to get ahead of our football and volleyball, cross country, and other fall sports, but the community has many opportunities to support us and see some of the great things that are happening outside the classroom.
Yeah, we got 3 more football games before the regular season's over, and I think we can win all 3.
I am optimistic as well.
Thanks for watching, and stay tuned.